In conversation with the Valley Radio Online.
Have you ever wondered what life would be like if you lived prosperously? Well, according to Midlands-based international author Maggy Whitehouse, prosperity is our birthright. It's that feeling of joy and peace of mind that enables us to be happy on all levels, to include that intangible energy that we call money. She contends that the world without literally is a reflection of the world within. It is blocks within the human psyche that stops you from believing it's acceptable to be prosperous.
Maggy's life has been one of adventure. She survived an encounter with a barracuda off the Barrier Reef, along with being swept down a raging river in full flood. She's experienced widowhood, redundancy and emigration. She is now wealthy, happily married, lives in a beautiful house, has wonderful friends and travels the globe for both work and play. Her contention is that she is living, breathing proof that it works, because she is still growing happier and more successful every year. Her career includes working as a radio and TV producer and broadcast journalist for both the BBC and Central Television. She's made network documentaries, written for Woman and Bella magazines, set up her own holistic health website, and since 1990, Maggy has studied and taught prosperity consciousness, mysticism and metaphysics. She says it's her goal to inspire more and more prosperity teachers to spread abundance. I caught up with Maggy on a recent visit to Bridgnorth, and we talked about how she went from a career in broadcasting to teach prosperity consciousness.
Well, I think we need to start this whole subject of what drove you into the law of attraction. Here you were, the successful feet on the ground broadcast journalist, producer in radio and television. Mm-hmm. You were working with major household names.
Yes.
Then you make this transition into the world of mysticism and metaphysics. Give us a little bit of the background about yourself and how you came to teach and write.
It's called the wake-up call.
Yeah.
And most people who are in holistic or spiritual work have had what's called the wake-up call. And in my case, I was actually completely at the peak of a career. I'd just made 2 television documentaries where I was presenting as well as producing in China. And I met my husband, Henry Barley, while we were filming. He was a sound recordist out there. So I had network TV programs and a brand new marriage, and everything seemed to be absolutely perfect. And then 3 months after Henry and I got married, Tiananmen Square happened, which meant my career went, because I just set myself up as an expert on China and written a book about China. And then Henry was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and he died 1 year and 16 days after our wedding. So suddenly, instead of everything being incredible, everything was awful, and absolutely hideously awful. And the only thing that kept me going in any way, shape or form was a kind of a battered version of faith. I'd turn up at church and say, please help me, please help me, please help me. And I was what you'd call in those days an armchair Christian, which meant I turned up at Christmas and maybe at Easter if I was feeling like it. And I got some idea that there was something, and I just went along with the role. You know, you don't think about it very much. But at Henry's deathbed, I'm sitting by his side in the hospital, and the hospital chaplain comes along and says, dear, dear, sad business, such a young man and all that. What's your religion, dear? So I said, Church of England. And he said, and what's your husband's religion? And I said, oh, he's an atheist. And the priest just went, well, I'm very sorry, he can't go to heaven if he doesn't believe in our Lord Jesus Christ. And walked away. And that was the wake-up call. I mean, now I can go, well, thank God that happened. Because it was like a great big cloak falling off you going, that's not right. Because Henry was a really good guy, you know. I'd been a bit of a trollop in my youth and things like that. And you know, when you, well, I wasn't so much of a trollop as a would-be trollop. I wasn't even very good at being a trollop. But I travelled a lot, and I was a journalist and a hard-nosed journalist. And Henry was a much kinder man than me and a much better man than I would have said I was. And it just seemed fundamentally wrong that a good man was effectively sent to hell, whereas because I'd signed up on the right dotted lines, I got to heaven. And so these 3 things together were the extraordinary breaking down of me, if you see what I mean. It was like the universe said, we've got a better job for you out here, and we want you to wake up and find out what is God, what is the source, what's going on. And of course you do something like that, you go headlong. People do go headlong into the, I want to help everybody else so that it doesn't have to happen to them. When in fact what you've got to do is heal you.
And you healed yourself by doing what?
I'm still healing myself. It's a lifelong job. But, well, the only thing that helped Henry when he was dying was hands-on healing. And that gave him good night's sleep and relaxed him and made him feel happy. And so I immediately investigated how one became a healer. And in those days, the only real way in was through what's now the Healing Trust. It was the National Federation of Spiritual Healers, and or a newfangled thing coming over from America called Reiki healing. Now, of course, if you're not a Reiki healer, you haven't even started in holistic health. But in those days, it was expensive and it was quite difficult to get to. And I threw myself heart and soul into that and found out that if you did what they advised you to do, which was practiced on yourself first, it started having strange and amazing results on you. But of course most healers train just to go out and help other people, but you've actually got to really, really work on yourself first. And I thought, well, I can do this, I'm quite good at it. I was very good with backs. For some reason my knack was with people with bad backs. Don't ask me why, bad backs it was. But I thought I can make a living at this. And I was kind of part-time making a living writing a relationships column for Bella, so I was in touch with lots of counsellors and being a sneaky journalist.
Because you work for both Bella and for Woman magazine.
I did freelance work for all the women's magazines.
And what were you writing on those days?
Relationships. What qualification had I to write on relationships? Absolutely none. None whatsoever. But I needed work. I was in London while Henry was sick, and I just thought, I wonder if I can do that, and rang up Bella. And in those days, I got enough street cred, having been a TV presenter and producer, that they said, give it a go. And I ended up doing their relationships column about 4 weeks out of 5. And what I would do is I'd ring round counsellors and people from National Guidance Council and things like that, and the Marriage Guidance Council, and ask them for case histories, which I'd write up, and they'd tell me what advice they were, and I sneakily got advice on bereavement as well. And the best bit of advice, I did an article for Living magazine, which doesn't exist anymore, I don't think, and on remarriage less than a year after the death of a partner. They commissioned it before Henry got ill, and that was the first thing I learnt about the law of attraction. Because I got free counselling from the head of Cruise because I was doing an article, and he told me one thing that was very, very profoundly important. He said, those who have genuinely loved and lose a partner will generally remarry, and quite quickly, because they really understand love and they understand that it was worth it. Those who had an average marriage or an unhappy marriage where they weren't actually owning up to it being unhappy don't marry again, because they want out. And the pain of the bereavement on top of the not very good relationship doesn't encourage them to find another relationship. So I found that very, very hopeful. And so I spend all this time interviewing people who got married within the year of the death of a partner. Nearly all men. Very few women did it. But 1 year and 4 months after Henry died, I met my next husband, who proposed to me without having even kissed me within a few weeks. So something was working.
So was prosperity working for you?
It was. But actually that gentleman, God bless him, didn't have a prosperity consciousness. And I've discovered that getting happy again, you see, we've all got something on which I call the happiness set point. Mm-hmm. And when you get really, really happy, it seems like your finances go down.
Which is what happened to you.
Which is exactly what happened to me. So I got happy, and I was practicing as a holistic therapist by then. And my finances just went through the floor. And I started thinking, this is weird. It's not as if I'm not qualified. It's not as if there isn't a demand for it. But everybody wanted me to work for free for a start, because there's a whole thing about spirituality and money. And I realised that the more holistic therapists I talked to, the more I realised that most of them were doing really, really badly. Most of them were having a really difficult time making ends meet, and they were having to go back to orthodox work, or they were running holistic centres that weren't working. And these people had the best intentions in the world. But for some reason, the two just weren't gelling. So I thought, well, it certainly isn't gelling for me. So what is it? And I had this huge problem with Jesus at that point because of what the priest had said to me. I'd thrown Christianity completely out of the window. I kept trying to throw God out of the window, but he wouldn't go. He kept sort of showing up in the background, and that wouldn't quite go. And so I thought, well, I better find out what this is, because I have a feeling that there's all this stuff about Jesus being poor. And I think I've got a belief system going on here. And the more I learned about holistic therapy, the more I realise it's all in here.
But this is how we're brought up, isn't it? Jesus had nothing.
So we were taught.
So we were taught. But
So
that's
we were taught. It's not, well, I started enthusiastically studying this guy Jesus because I was really mad at him. And I started studying Judaic mysticism because my second husband, thank God, was a Jew, who took me into that kind of line of thinking. So it was all wonderfully synchronistic. And what I discovered was that if you want to understand about Jesus, one, you've got to start studying New Testament Greek, and two, you've got to start going back in time and finding out how people lived in those days, because everything is relevant to the date and the time. And one of the things I learned as a journalist, on the Stourbridge County Express, it's who said it, to whom, where, why, and who was listening.